Good morning, everybody. Dear Professor and colleague, it's my honor to start this morning session in the second day of the National Cancer Institute Conference, and it's a great honor and pleasure to have my co-chairperson, Professor Dr. Manal Maawad, Head of Clinical Oncology Department in the Ain Shams University, as well as my dear friend and my dear Professor Dr. Abbas Omar, Professor of Clinical Oncology at Alexandria University. We have a great honor and pleasure to introduce our speaker, Professor Dr. Samuel Moret from Greece. And Professor Dr. Samuel Moret is a very known figure in Greece and in Egypt as well. He is a friend of the National Cancer Institute, Cairo, Egypt, and he visited us several times. And he is very pioneer in molecular pathology. And his presentation in this morning will be molecular testing, when and what test. So please, Dr. Moret.
Okay, that's better. Good morning, everybody. It's quite early. To the chairpersons, thank you very much. Ola, especially, for inviting me back again. I think this is my 5th year here. We will be coming back with Rohan, of course, yearly. I've been given a task that I wasn't sure what to do, to tell practitioners when and which tests to use is not really appropriate. You realise I work on the MQN pathology board, so I get to see a lot of data and I get to see a lot of different types of testing. Everything from immunohistochemistry all the way through to molecular pathology and signatures, for example. I have a lot of conflict of interest, so I can't tell you what tests not to use. If I give you an indication or something that doesn't work too well, obviously that probably means more than I'm telling you. Okay, disclosures, forget them, too many. So, as from yesterday, it was an educational session, so those who attended yesterday, it's sort of a run-off from there. What I want to give you is sort of the feeling of what you should be asking about your diagnostic tests and their application. So why? Well, that's fairly evident. Biomarker criteria, we all know it. I'll go through this. The key things really are to improve patient survival, decrease toxicity, etc. We want to individualize our patients with your targeted therapies to improve survival and TTP or PFS. You have to actually identify which ones. So we're using biomarkers, whether they be molecular or not. Two distinct classifications. One is the prognostic one. The prognostic one, because a biomarker may be both prognostic and predictive, or singularly one of the two. So you have to be careful what you're thinking about, what you're doing. Of course, prognostic is something like oncotype, for example, which is more prognostic than predictive. Predictive is something which is going to give you the effect of the outcome of the treatment. So this is directly related to what we're talking about in targeted therapies. Now, why do we want to do it? Well, if you just take lung cancer, for example, and if you screen patients for a set of different mutations and you give them those agents that are targeted against those treatments, you can have better outcomes to those who either don't have any driving mutations that we can understand or didn't receive the drug. And of course we're talking, as I mentioned yesterday, we're talking about immunohistochemistry and genomic events. We're doing somatic mutation, germline mutation. We don't think about much else. So there's a whole host of other different pragmatic issues that may affect the tumour biology, and we're not looking at those biomarkers at the moment, but they influence the biomarker that we're using today. So if you test for EGFR, they don't all respond to anti-EGFR agents simply because they're all heterogeneous. There's something else in there that's affecting the outcome. And I'll give you two slides. This is what we had in 2013 approximately. And now I want you to think back to where you were in 2013 as to what you would think we would have today on the same list. And I've got the list for you for 2016 because this is what we generated basically. And this is what we thought we would have in 2016. Well, we don't have all of them. We still have the ones we have from 2013. But it's rapidly changing since 2013. Now we have massive parallel sequencing, and we can do a full genome in a few days if we wish to. So we don't have an issue in terms of the technology anymore of identifying patients and stratifying them for any of the biomarkers we're looking at. It's actually the clinical application of those biomarkers and having drugs will be effective in those instances. So you can see that there's a lot of talk about PIK3CA, it's just in lung cancer. So you can think about all the other tumor types as well. So there's a lot of promise, but there's a long way to go before we get there. And of course, this is what we have today. This is what our patients come with when they come into the clinic. Many of them, they come in with many questions, but they can do it today if they wish. You have to interpret that information. That's a hell of a task. And of course, you have to think about your biomarkers. So again, EGFR in lung cancer, if you have a mutation and you give an inhibitor to that mutation, you can have an excellent improvement. If you give the same inhibitor to wild-type patients, those who do not have those mutations, you can actually cause damage. So this is also something to think about as well, in terms of how you want to use your diagnostics and how you want to implement them. And I'll skip this one, this was just extra data on RAS. And of course, it's not just limited to lung cancer. If you do go to colorectal cancer, we know for many years now there are several different mutations that could affect outcomes to anti-EGFR therapies. And if you think about it clinically, if you look at some of the data from the Italians, you can see that you increase the number of genetic events coming this way on the curve, you decrease the probability of survival as well. So this will start to come into play, but really at the moment we're stuck with NRAS and KRAS. BRAF is still a conundrum, and these two haven't entered the clinical decision-making criteria yet. So now, which tests? As I said, I work on a global EQA program for molecular pathology, so I want to give you some ideas about how to think about it. And the FDA and the EMA will look for CE-IVD kits in terms of your diagnostics. And really, this is where we'll probably be in 2017, 2018. Okay, this is going to become mandatory, pulled in for Europe as well. They go through a set of stringent criteria in terms of how the tests are functioning in the real world, how they should work in your hands compared to my hands compared to someone else's. So really, you're just getting a CE-marked device or a kit, and this is what you should be looking for in your first line. But of course, lab-developed tests do exist in clear labs in America. We'll come back to that later. It doesn't happen so much in Europe, although we still have the availability of doing so. And of course, what you need to see from your laboratories is that they perform an EQA program to obtain this ISO in Europe, okay, and globally. And you can use your own tests, so you can use lab-developed tests to do this programming, but it's much easier if you have a CE-IVD, okay? So then, I wanted just to give you a view of what do the patient, what do the oncologist want. We'll go through 4 different points here quickly. So, genotype of clinically relevant samples. Obviously, this is the most important, apart from the result. And really, there's a host of issues, but it's when, which, how often, and where, with whom, which diagnostic lab. This is always difficult to understand as well. Liquid biopsies are also going to pose a set of extra pressures on this when they do become more clinically validated. And of course, I just give you an idea. Heterogeneity within tumours. This is BRAF in melanoma. 30% alteration between primaries and metastasis. You can keep getting data sets into this, and the data is expanding. You will hear labs that will tell you we have no differences, but there are labs that have differences. So you have to choose what the reality may be. And the same thing goes for EGFR and lung cancer. Between primary and metastasis, you have a 20% switch. So, of course, heterogeneity is a huge issue that we have to consider every time with every case. And this is also really relevant to the type of diagnostic we're performing. Okay? And, of course, if we think about EGFR, there are a lot of different biomarkers. They're not all clinically validated yet. The same But of course, each of those is affected by secondary, tertiary, etc. oncogene modulators. And this affects the outcome. We're starting to get a hold on some of these, but it's going to take a lot of time to do so. So the point fact is we have one mutation that we look at, or one genetic event, or one biomarker, but really is influenced by many others, and we have to see that across time. Of course, for EGFR, this is old data now. If you just look at the bottom right-hand corner, we have in our database now 427 different mutations that exist in EGFR. So the complexity within understanding which mutations you should be using, of course, most of these we have no clinical data on at all in terms of effectiveness. And of course, don't be fooled, it's not V600 only for BRAF. There are 60 different mutations reported in BRAF from melanoma cases. If you go to the literature and have a good look. How they work, we don't know either. And then we start to think about mechanisms of resistance, anti-EGFR agents, for example, lung cancer T790, a huge proportion of patients will have resistance in this mechanism, and now we start to see others. So now we think that if we're thinking about following our patients, we have to start thinking about what's going to happen in relapse, what's going to happen in terms of resistance, and then what biomarkers will react to that. Second point is quick turnaround time. This is fairly obvious. This is the standard workflow, and really what we're asking from quality assurance programs is that you can perform and relieve your test to the patient or to the clinician within 5 or 6 working days. I think that makes clinical sense. A true answer. And this is a little bit black and white. This was the first program we reported on EGFR testing from one of the programs we ran in about, this was in about 100 laboratories worldwide, and we had 25% of the labs failing. We're into this program now 6 years, and we still see a 20% fail rate. We did 338 labs a month ago. Fortunately, it's improving in many respects because we don't just fail in terms of the genotype, we also fail in terms of reporting. The genotyping errors are reducing and the reporting errors stay about the same. Now, when you're thinking about the different kits that you can use, and this is just for EGFR, the same as is now for BRAF and also for RAS, there's a whole host of different techniques that you can use, and what you need to think about is how well you can identify a mutation. So this is really poor at identifying a mutation, and this is really good at identifying a mutation. Then you need to think of the coverage. So as I said for EGFR, there's a whole host of mutations which may be clinically relevant. So you need to look at known and new mutations probably, and not just known only. Okay? But what's really clinically relevant is this threshold here. So if you use tests that can detect mutations at 0.1 or 0.001% and report those out, how clinically relevant are they? Well, they're not, because indications for the drugs that are using these companion diagnostics have never been tested below 5 or 2% at the moment. Are all CEV IVD kits the same? Well, they're not. Sorry, you can't read the slide. This is just 4 anti-EGFR kits for EGFR, and you can see one of them is T790. Well, for us in an EQA process, that's just a fail up front, because every time we run a program, we put a T790 in. If you miss one of them, you fail. I think the clinical relevance of this is too much to think that you should use this kit. Okay? So just think about what you're asking and what the kit offers. And are all kits actually really good? Well, I'll be really bad, and as I said, I don't want to slag off some of these kits, but TheraScreen, not until the new version, the previous version, was very poor. This is a round-robin test of 6 different labs, and they found 32% missed by arms using TheraScreen. And we see a lot of different kits, and we've reported to TheraScreen before from our panel, and we've reported to 2 other nice kit designers that they have failures that they didn't realize in their kits. So we see a lot of different techniques being used. The clinical application application of those needs to be rectified by the fact that if they go through a CE-IVD process, at least there's some reassurance that it's the right one to use. It doesn't say that the others are not good, it just means that the others haven't gone through those processes yet. And then, of course, the clear report is pertinent to you because you're asking a diagnostic laboratory to give you something that you want the result from. You want it to be true, but you have to be able to interpret it and then use it clinically. And this relates to both you as a clinician and also your patient. And of course, I'll just give you Oncotype, and I can say good things and bad things about Oncotype, but what I'll say is it gives a 3-page report. We don't believe this is good. We want a 1-page report so you don't lose information. Secondly, just thinking about Oncotype, does anyone use CMF today? How many patients is this relevant for? So your second page probably doesn't need to be there. Surely 120%, the third report doesn't need to be there because they're giving you indication for ER, PR, HER2 by messenger RNA lab, and there's no clinical validity of this whatsoever. This is just misleading information or information which could mislead you in your clinical decision-making process. This should not be there in the eyes of the EQA provider. Okay. So just in summary, and then I'll talk a little bit about some other things. We want a short tab. You want it to be available to everybody. So this comes back to something that Rohan was telling me this morning. I don't want to spend $5,000 on a 400-gene panel. What am I going to do with it? How am I going to convince the patient to do so when I can do the 3 tests that I really need for about 400 euros? Well, do the 400 euro test. If the patient really wants to go and do it, send them somewhere else maybe. Because I'm sorry, Rohan, but how are you going to interpret the data? You're not. Look for CE-IVD, or at least those labs that have ISO certification. This is what you're looking for, not necessarily this, but definitely this. Include the relevant biomarkers and include those, as I just said, that you don't really need, because it's just complexity. This is making it too complex. It has to be legible for the clinician and the patient. So the report you get, you should be able to interpret it very quickly. You don't need to read between the lines. You should say clearly EGFR mutation positive, which one? Or EGFR mutation negative, not detected. With an interpretation. It needs to be reproducible in terms of we have to be able to believe that we can reproduce the same test in another laboratory using the same kit or a different kit, different diagnostic procedure, and get the same result. That's not the same if we have a different piece of material from the patient going to one lab and going to another in terms of heterogeneity. So we'll see issues, and it has to be true. And then I want to talk about which and when, and I'll just do this very quickly because you all know the whiches and the whens. But think about how you're going to implement them in the best case scenario. So this case is lung cancer at the moment. This is sort of the pipeline that we should be thinking about diagnostic testing. You can leave this off if you wish, obviously, but many labs include it. And then you need to think about what you will do. Well, you can only use it for metastatic patients at the moment. Really, you want to think about panel sequencing later on. It's going to cut your cost, it's going to cut your turnaround time, and it's going to give you all of these things simultaneously, including the translocations. Okay? You don't want to go below 1% sensitivity because we have no clinical indication for those cases. And of course, what do we do at retesting? We need retesting. And this is becoming mandatory in lung cancer in reality. Because when they relapse, we have to realize what we're going to do with them. We realize that they're becoming different cases. So we have to be able to retest. We have to have something that we can retest when we need to, with or without surgical biopsy. So that's where we're getting the plasma samples, for example. So liquid biopsies come into here. But remember, as I mentioned yesterday, we have a 30% fail rate. I'm going to use the word fail in the wrong way. Fail doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means that there's no concordance between the primary tumour and the plasma. Maybe the patient doesn't have any circulating tumour DNA. So we just call that as a fail. But in reality, this is really a black box for you because you don't know what to do. Did the test fail because there wasn't enough material? Did the test fail because it failed? Did the test fail for some other reason? So maybe you need to do it again. And if you think about statistics, if you've got a 30% fail rate, You need to do the test 3 times to have a 95% confidence that the test was real, the result was real. Okay? 3 times. And of course, when they do need retesting, they need all the biomarkers, plus the resistance ones checked. For predictive markers against chemotherapy and lung cancer, sorry, forget it. They don't work. There's no clinical validation. Be very careful with this. Colorectal is very interesting. I like it quite a lot. I'm just going to give you for all, including stage 2 cases, and I put oncotype here as a sort of an adjunct to what you might want to do. Not necessarily that it should be there mandatorily, but it's nice because if you do MSI up front with RAS mutation testing and RAS, then you get an idea on those cases that are not going to do very well. You're going to start to think about HNPCC because you've got MSI, and if you add BRAF, you can go straight to screening here with a 1 in 3 incidence of these cases who are BRAF wild type. And then you can screen for HNPCC. This is the quickest way to find these patients probably. It's a nice screening strategy. Of course, go back to typical RAS codons, and it depends where you are, because, for example, in England, if you have a RAS mutation anywhere, you can eliminate a patient. But in other countries, the indications are different. That's the basis of the codons that you need to check for RAS. You can do your RAS testing at diagnosis, basically, because there's only a 5% discordance between primary metastasis over time in terms of the RAS status. So you're quite sure that you've got the same patient. If you want to test again, you can do so easily. It's a 5-gene panel really that you need to think about in next-gen sequencing, although it's really only RAS and BRAF that are validated. The others are adjuncts to that, and I include MSI in my panels. Or you can just go for conventional allele-specific PCR, which is probably the better way of doing it in terms of a single diagnosis. And again, don't go low tests that tell you that I can detect the mutation in 0.001% of the population. It's also misleading. Melanoma, well, probably not one disease, and we have to think we've got different sites of melanoma, but we have different mutational spectrum as well, depending on where we are. And of course, if we think about primarily metastatic melanoma, we're talking about BRAF. We include a 5-gene panel, but of course, BRAF can be done by, for example, COBAS or TheraScreen. I'm quite happy with using those techniques. Liquid biopsies are going to come out, I believe, this coming year for monitoring. So this means that you'll have diagnosis and monitoring using liquid biopsies. This monitoring story means that we need point-of-care diagnostics, because you don't want to wait 5 days or 4 days or 3 days for your diagnostic to come out in terms of a standard next-gen sequencing panel or another diagnostic technique lab's using. You want to do it in your practice, or you want it done in the clinic, and these POC devices do exist today. I won't talk about them, they exist. And of course, you have a high level of intratumor and intertumor heterogeneity, as I mentioned before. It's up to 30% in melanoma, so you need to test 3 times. 1, 2, 3 times to be sure that the wild type is wild type. So think about how you're going to do it, if that's really relevant for you or not. You don't need to believe me. You can't look yourself. You make the judgment. I'm just giving you clues on how to think about it. And of course, only the BRAF is validated here, so you can't really use panels to that extent. Breast cancer. So breast cancer, HER2 testing and diagnosis, usage. Forget about immunohistochemistry. It's much more convenient. It's permanent. It works a lot better. Concordance issues are a lot better as well between laboratories. Signatures. I'll show you this in 3 slides or 4 slides below. Hereditary breast cancer, counselling. I'll mention this now. TNBCs. I know Keith Miller in England very well, and the programs they run there in immunohistochemistry, and he is evident that if you have an ER negative patient, test again somewhere else, because there should be 95% of them positive. So the triple negative breast cancers are probably lower than we really expect, but it's an easy test to check. Okay? Just go back and check the patient, because it does make a real clinical difference for a simple 100-unit test. Hereditary genetics, I didn't talk about this, but obviously they fall into place. I'll just mention BRCA1 and 2, just for some things to think about. Of course, you have to think about what you're going to do with your patient, and this is standard criteria, global, not just in the US. You have to counsel your patient because it affects the family. It doesn't affect the patient only. And there are many aspects that you don't realize. You have to put yourself in their place. If you're BRCA positive, what will that do to your children? How will it affect your parents? How will it affect your sister-in-law? How will it affect everyone, including your husband? And this is a decision that's not yours alone. So be very careful. And there have been cases in the States where partners have taken their partners to court and sued them. So it is an issue, and you need to think about it. So mandatory genetic counselling before testing. Genetic counselling. That's not you. I'm sorry. That's a team. You're not genetic counsellors. Maybe one or two of you are, but you're not. Okay? The majority. And you have to have the genetic counselling after the test, regardless of the result. Because a true negative case is not always a true negative case. Because there's always this conundrum that I need to follow the patient anyway, because maybe they do have something we didn't detect. I won't go through that. Breast cancer screening, I put the numbers here in terms of incidences so you can realise what you should ask from your panels basically. It's 52% of BRCA1, 32% of BRCA2, and the other 16% fall into this group, plus a few other genes, but it's probably less than this. We're probably missing about 5 of this anyway. But this is sort of a standard panel that you should be running. Doing 50 genes in breast cancer is also ridiculous, because you don't really have the clinical indication to do so. And of course, for BRCA and ovarian cancer, you're really with BRCA1 and 2, and this is both for somatic and germline. So don't test the blood, test the tumour, because you've got both, and then go from there. And then I just wanted, can I have 2 more minutes, please? I just wanted to talk about signatures, and this is something that our quality assurance program has been thinking about for like 4 years, and we really don't know how to handle it. There are several issues that we can't really contemplate in terms of how we would roll out a program to assure that these types of tests are appropriate and they work well. So there are a number of multi-gene predictors, and you can just look at them on the right-hand side. There are others that are all coming. You have to mix and match what's right for you and your patient, and of course the tumor type. And I'm just going to highlight these. What I put on is these are centralized tests, being done in only one laboratory. Okay? Which means they're clear labs. The lab developed tests, nothing else. They haven't gone through an external quality assurance program of anything, nothing. What they say is the truth, that's it. You can't disprove it by testing it somewhere else. These 2 tests are CE-IVD, so you can test it in other laboratories because they're decentralized. We have issues in terms of quality assurance. Now, what do we do with these guys if we include these in the quality assurance program? Well, we are including these in the quality assurance program. It's going to be complex, but we have to start somewhere because there are more tests coming. So, put your patient within its criteria, make your decision. I'll forget these because there's no point now. And this is what I was saying, that we're trying to think about what we'll do in a quality assurance panel for gene signatures, and really our conundrum comes down to this material. What do we use as material? Because a lot of it we genetically generate. We generate cell lines that have specific mutations, but in terms of generating something that would work in terms of a panel test, it's a little bit more complex, especially when you're looking at SPRMA levels. So we don't know where to go from there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Professor Bouguet. We have time for just 2 questions. Yes.
Go on.
Anyway, thank you for the excellent summary and presentation. The question is about... Thank you again for the wonderful summary and presentation. The question is about the new treatment option in oncology, immuno-oncology. And we know if the tumor has a lot of mutations, the response rate to immunotherapies are high. Do we have an easy method to define the mutational load of the tumor, to define if or not this immuno-oncologic approaches?
I'd have to say no at the moment. Sorry, Robin. We're not there yet. And if you're thinking about PD-L1, for example, and what we're going to do with
it's one of them.
Yes,
or
whatever. But in this type of thing, the biomarkers for this are a requirement from the FDA for companies to have indication for their drugs. They have to go through a biomarker program to show evidence that there is or there isn't. So this is mandatory from the FDA now. Doesn't mean that they will find one. It doesn't mean what they find will be a good one. At the moment, there is a group in the UK looking at 4 different PD-L1s on 4 different platforms with 6 different antibodies. What they come up with at the end, I'm not sure what it'll be like, but I'm sure that it won't be what we really expect. And we need more data as well for those types of patients. Yes, at the back.
Professor Ahmed.
Good morning.
Good morning. I want to welcome you here in Egypt and thank you for your excellent presentation. I just want to ask you about the liquid biopsies for other markers than genetic mutation. I mean, for example, for ER, PR, and HER2, because sometimes biopsy is so difficult, especially in metastatic breast cancer. Do you think liquid biopsies can replace tissue biopsies in these cases or not yet validated?
I think the liquid biopsy issues that we have at the moment is the same as a nice talk given yesterday in the session I was in by a cytologist who was saying that they have about a 50% fail rate in terms of liquid biopsies, in terms of cell specimens, finding of aspirates, etc. They have diagnostic issues in terms of having enough material, the correct material, appropriate samples, and they would like to go back and do it again. If we're talking about plasma or urine or saliva, it's much more easy to go back and retest because it's not invasive. And that's where we would like to see ourselves going, if it's at all possible. But of course, the big conundrum is always you will have a huge percentage of fails because it doesn't exist, there's not enough, or it's just not the right thing to do. So you'll have this black box of patients, one set of patients that you can classify and you can run with plasma or a liquid biopsy. Another set of categorization of the patient population, which may be 30, 40, 50%, depending on the tumor type, that you have no extra information from liquid biopsies. So you will just not do it. Ahmed, sorry.
Regarding the T7, thank you for your presentation. Regarding the T790M mutation, are there any ongoing trials to overcome this mutation? Or if I'm faced with a patient with the T790M, what should I do?
Yes, there are studies ongoing. I think I'm right, Dr. Verbeek. There are ongoing studies specific for patients who have T790M, and of course there are T7